Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today is another episode in our Why Podcasts Work series. We're going to be talking to a serial podcaster, a sales evangelist, Scott Barker. He's head of partnerships at Sales Hacker. He's evangelist at Outreach, and he's the host of the Sales Engagement podcast. Scott is a good friend of ours. We love collaborating with him. Scott, welcome to the show, man. How's it going today?
Thanks, brother. I'm happy to be here and, staying positive in light of what's going on right now in the crazy world we live in right now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, you and I are here. We're smiling. We're social distancing. We're across time zones, across Zoom, but we can still deliver value in digital channels. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, a digital channel that obviously we believe in a lot here at Sweetfish. I know that's kind of meta. You're listening to a podcast about podcasting. But Scott, you guys and the team at Sales Hacker and Outreach have shown a lot of investment in this channel. You guys have the Sales Engagement podcast that is regularly releasing episodes for B2B sales folks. You've had the Sales Hacker podcast for even longer. Give people a little bit of context. I mean, one, if they're not familiar with you, and they definitely should be, give us a little bit of background there, and then what you guys are up to, and then we're going to dive into some of the strategies and tactics and your experience with two podcasts under one roof right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I won't spend too much time on myself. If anyone wants to connect, go find me on LinkedIn. But I'm a kind of a sales guy at heart that over years, I probably sold into marketing too long and became a marketer myself. So that's what I often say, and spent a lot of time in kind of tech and media. And now I'm really lucky to be a part of such a fantastic organization that is Outreach, which acquired the company that I was running revenue for, which was Sales Hacker, a media company. So this really cool acquisition I was able to be a part of, where a tech company, a SaaS company, bought a media company. So it's been really cool to watch that and learn a ton. But go check me out on LinkedIn. And Outreach kind of is the number one sales engagement platform on the market. Unicorn company out of Seattle, recently named fourth fastest growing company in North America. I'll save you all the pitch, but Forrester just released a really cool total economic impact report, where the return on outreach investment was 387%, a 5x return. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Go check out that report.
387%. You heard it here, folks. We'll find that report and we'll put it in the show notes. That's all we need to say there. So let's dive in, man. Let's talk about, as you and I were talking about this, we mentioned at the top of the episode, you guys have two podcasts essentially under one big roof now, the Sales Hacker podcast, as well as the Sales Engagement podcast. Talk a little bit about Sales Hacker, the journey that's been on, why that was something that you guys wanted to start early in the Sales Hacker days, amidst all the things you guys are doing. People know about, Sales Hacker webinars. It's always in my LinkedIn feed is a channel you guys have used with much success, as well as SEO and blogging. Podcasting has kind of stayed the course through the acquisition and something that has been effective for you guys. So I'd love to hear from that perspective. You have tons of experience with this. What role has it played for you guys throughout all the twists and turns and everything going on these days?
Yeah, for sure. So the Sales Hacker podcast has been around almost 2 years now. So when you think back 2 years, podcasting was definitely alive and well, but it was not as commonplace maybe as it is today. And I remember we had been thinking about launching a podcast for probably even a year, maybe even 2 years before we actually did. And the reason for it was, just like when we talk about, let's say, sales outreach, we're trying to get someone's attention. We often talk about omni-channel, and we talk about, you're going to have to call them, you're going to have to email them, you're going to have to go on LinkedIn, you're going to have to find the channel that works for them. So similarly, when you're building a community like Sales Hacker, which is now 166,000 B2B sales professionals, those members like to consume content in their own unique way, right? We have people that are constantly coming back to the blog, or we have people that only like the webinars because they're a live experience and they get to interact and they get to ask questions. And then we knew that there was this other section of people that maybe were on the go, maybe super busy, and we needed to find a way to reach those people and keep them engaged. But we didn't want to lose, the quality or anything. So that's what really took us so long. We should have done it ages before, but we were really looking for a host who who we were confident could bring the type of experience that we were hoping for. And we found that in a gentleman named Sam Jacobs, who's the founder of Revenue Collective. And he's just a kick-ass host. And we've just seen really unprecedented growth in that channel. And it's now become, one of our strongest channels for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some evolution of that, not only seeing it from Sweetfish's side, but personally being a consumer of the Sales Hacker podcast content, going from, Sam has long form conversations with sales leaders about their journey and lots of lessons learned, and now Friday fundamental episodes. So mixing up long form and short form episodes that kind of serve a different purpose. So definitely some evolution there. I think no matter the format, interview based, solo episodes, short snippets, long form, it's really about delivering value. And as you and I were riffing a little bit earlier, Scott, you were talking about delivering value before the funnel and building a community. Can you talk a little bit about that for the marketers listening, since you're a salesperson selling to marketers who has become a marketer himself?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I almost want to go back to the acquisition, right? So this first time this ever happens, really, a tech company buys a media company, at least to my knowledge. And why that happened was for this reason. Outreach has a mission to help every single salesperson that's out there. But when you typically think about that, that's like, okay, they're going to help every single sales rep out there who's in their funnel, or who's a client already, or who's a prospect, right? That's typically what you see with companies. But the acquisition of Sales Hacker made that promise go before the funnel. So before anyone even hears about outreach, that promise begins. So as soon as you decide you want to be a sales professional, we are going to help you get better at that role. And I think, podcasts are a great example of that, that same line of thinking. It's how do we reach the people who they could one day be prospects, but they're not anywhere near a funnel yet, but we want to engage with them. We want to understand them. We want them to think the way we think. We want them to use the terms that we use when we're speaking to them. So if and when they get there, we're at least speaking the same language and maybe think the same way.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love that. I mean, people kind of rag on Gary Vee for being so bullish on TikTok over the last year, but what is he doing? He's playing the long game, adding value and getting in front of folks who may one day be his buyers. It takes a mindset. It takes an investment in the long game, but it pays dividends. I mean, just in 2 years, and with the way things are changing right now, it feels like last Monday was just forever ago, and the time passes so quickly. You mentioned 2 years of the Sales Hacker podcast, but just in 2 years, which is a short time frame in the grand scheme of things, you guys have seen some tremendous results in just the community building, not only the reach of the podcast, but the way it bolstered Sales Hacker and now Outreach's thought leadership position in the sales community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just cracked, and every time I look at this number, it's you kind of hit this exponential growth, which is really exciting. But we just cracked 500,000 downloads, which is absolutely incredible. And I think one of the coolest things, which I didn't mention before, is it did bring a new audience. Now, this is anecdotal, right? I don't have the full breakdown of our listenership. I wish I could, but anecdotally, we seem to have drawn more of an executive crowd. Now, that might be because of our host, Sam, who is a prolific CRO out of New York. It could be the fact that executives are busier. They don't have time to read a blog. They don't have time to come on a webinar. But that's been a really cool, I guess, byproduct of starting this, is bringing in more of that executive crowd. And it's been really cool. And, we were talking earlier, and I want to make this note of, so we now do have opportunity to monetize it. So we have opportunity to monetize the Sales Hacker podcast, and we do so very kind of sparingly. We want to make sure that it's in line with our audience. And I would urge any listener out there, because I get hit up all the time. People are like, oh, Scott, I think he knows how to monetize podcasts. Don't do it too early. You do it too early, and you are shooting yourself in the foot. And it's going to, A, the community you're creating is not going to like it. B, the people that are paying for it aren't going to see the results. They're not going to come back. And it's just going to be a bad experience for everyone. So don't monetize too early. And when you do, be very selective with who you let on the podcast, because that company has to somehow still provide value for your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's fantastic advice. So we've talked a lot about the Sales Hacker podcast. The Sales Engagement podcast is one that you host regularly. And you guys have a very common mindset with us and what James has written about in his book, Content-Based Networking. We've talked about delivering value to people who may one day be a prospect. They're not a prospect today and you don't even know, but you've got to go after that community and be all in. And I think when most marketers in B2B think about podcasting, they think about delivering value just to the audience. However, you guys see both sides of the coin. What was the unlock for you guys in looking at, hey, the guests, there is a way to deliver value to our community in the folks who are guests on the podcast, not just the listeners?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how the Sales Engagement podcast kind of came about, and then I'll get to the question, is so we were basically, we had written a book and we're like, okay, what are all the ways that we can promote this book? And we thought, well, we could interview all the people that we interviewed in the book on this live format. It could be really cool. And we actually started it to support the book. And we launched it and it started seeing some really great success. And so it kind of quickly almost like overtook the book in popularity, which is really cool. And yeah, it's been, there's multiple different ways that we kind of use that podcast. So we don't monetize that one. There is a little kind of branded shout out of outreach at the beginning. So, you get a little bit of brand awareness there. And then there's still kind of this thought leadership piece, which is, again, goes back to, we talk about sales engagement and sales the way that we want the rest of the world to kind of think, and use the terms that we think and where we see modern selling going. Because we believe if more people start picking up modern selling practices, then our total addressable market is going to grow. So that's kind of the thought leadership piece. And then lastly, you mentioned like this demand gen piece, which most people see the demand gen coming from their listeners, which it very well could be, but still to this day, it's a little bit tougher to track attribution unless you're pulling them to, a landing page with a discount code, or perhaps one I really like is push them to an asset that maybe complements the episode that have been done, maybe a downloadable worksheet or something. Then it's easier to track attribution, but it's still a tough challenge. But where you can do demand gen is with your guests. So if you have your tier one accounts, these top tier accounts that you're really trying to break into, and you've got your classic SDRs, BDRs, calling into them, trying to book appointments. It can be very difficult for, let's say the Fortune 100 companies. Well, it's much less difficult when you lead with value. And I reach out and I say, hey, VP of sales, you've had such a fantastic career to date. I really think our listeners could benefit from it. And they could, for sure. So then when you ask that question, they're like, oh, yeah, let's do it. And then you essentially do a live discovery. That's really what's happening, right? Because you're just being curious. If you're a good podcast host, you're just curious. So you're just asking these questions about them, their business, their story. And then you amass all this really interesting information about the company and the person. And, this is where EQ comes into it. Like, you can for sure do this the wrong way and and this has actually happened to me. I've been on podcasts where they basically tried to close me at the end of it, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. Because it's not about that. It's more about building the relationship with the person. And when the time comes, or they eventually have the business problem that you solve, that relationship's already going to be there and the trust is going to be there. So that's a big one for us, is that kind of, you guys kind of coined the term content networking, but it can be really valuable. And then the last thing I'll say there is, yes, there is kind of the prospect. So the direct revenue generating, like, hey, this is a company I want to sell to. Let's get them in the funnel. Let's have a conversation with them. There's also, in the world that I kind of play in, which is business development and partnerships, there's also value you can drive to strengthen partnerships or channel partnerships. So if you have other, let's say in our case, sales technology companies that are complementary to outreach and they are a referral channel for us, we can say, hey, we may not at this time be able to drive a bunch of referrals your way because, our business objectives are pointed over here right now. But what we can do, let's give you a bunch of shout outs on the podcast. Let's get your executive team on the podcast and we'll use our visibility in the channels we've created to provide value that way to kind of thank you or encourage you to bring more business our way as well.
I love that, man. I mean, it's very sequential in my mind, the way you broke it down. It's not just about the audience. If you're delivering value there and you're inviting people on who genuinely will add value, okay, box number one. All right. Step number two, do it the right way. Genuinely be curious, genuinely talk shop with these folks, whether you sell to sales executives, marketing executives like we do, IT executives, HR professionals, whatever the case is, be curious, talk shop with them, and you will learn more about your target market. Even if it's not a discovery call that helps you break into that one account, overall, you are going to gain more pulse on what's going on in your target market. Don't hard close them as soon as you stop, hit record. And then also look at, okay, there's value that you have because you have this media property, even before you have huge listenership and have hit 500,000 downloads like you guys have with your show, Scott. There's still value in giving them that third-party validation, whether that's a partner, it's an adjacent company, it's a reseller. Think about your network and not just prospects. If you go down this road, then you start to just unlock, oh, wait, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a while. We've had a partnership for a while. How can I just add some value? Let's have them on the podcast real quick. I love the way that you're walking through that and giving people some practical advice.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. You probably already know that we think you should start a podcast if you haven't already. But what if you have and you're asking these kinds of questions? How much has our podcast impacted revenue this year? How's our sales team actually leveraging the podcast content? If you can't answer these questions, you're actually not alone. This is why Casted created the very first content marketing platform made specifically for B2B podcasting. Now you can more easily search and share your audio content while getting greater visibility into the impact of your podcast. The marketing teams at Drift, Terminus, and here at Sweetfish have started using Casted to get more value out of our podcasts, and you probably can too. You can check out the product in action at casted.us/growth. That's casted.us/growth. All right, let's get back to the show.
Speaking of practical advice, what is your advice for marketers as you talk to sales and marketing leaders? What's some of the common objections or pitfalls you see with folks where you're saying, hey, you guys should start a podcast? What are you hearing out there? Because maybe you're hearing different things from me because I'm the guy who's selling podcasting services. So I'd love to hear, and I think our listeners would love to hear as well from someone who's a seasoned podcaster. What is it that you wish you'd have known, from the get-go that has helped you along the way? And what do you think, would help other B2B marketing leaders who haven't yet started a podcast and they're thinking about it?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is it's not as daunting as you think it's going to be. I think everyone thinks, they think of podcasts and they're like, oh, I got to have this studio and this couch and I got to wear nice clothes and I got to fly my guest in and, I need it to be so top notch. And the funny thing about it is I find sometimes the less I prepare for an episode and the more kind of hacky it feels, sometimes the more people resonate with it. There is so much out there right now in terms of content that people crave authenticity and they crave this realness. And I've even A/B tested this with like videos I've put on LinkedIn, and one that's super high quality versus one that is literally me on my iPhone, going to my next meeting, and the lower quality one will do better. And trust me, I've A/B tested this like 20 times. So people crave that, is that real kind of off the cuff. So if you've been in an industry for any amount of time or you have any sort of knowledge, let it come freely. And it's as simple as getting a Zoom license or whatever video recording software you want to use. And what next time you catch up with some of your business colleagues that you probably already have a meeting on the books, for learning, for sharing knowledge, say, hey man, why don't we record this? And or hey man, hey woman, let's just hit record. And then you record it and send it to, an agency like Sweetfish. Of course, we love working with you guys. And then that's it. And it's so unbelievably simple. I do this probably 0.015% of my job. And I just fit this in between my meetings. Sometimes I can hit two birds with one stone and have an actual meeting as well as record something. And then I repurpose that all on LinkedIn. So there's my LinkedIn post for the week. And, I guess, without going too much of a rant, it's not as difficult as you think. And you'll see a tremendous amount of value quickly. And if there's anyone listening to this who's like thinking of ways they can provide value to their organization above and beyond their role, many of us now, especially kind of millennials, seem to have this itch of, okay, I love my lane and I'm good at this, but like I'm also super interested in all this stuff, all this other stuff. A podcast is a really good way to scratch that itch, where you get to talk to super interesting people from all walks of life, from all different areas that have all different skill sets, all different ways of thinking. And it can be a fantastic way to help boost your career as well as provide tremendous value to your organization.
Man, I love all of that. Notwithstanding the shout out to Sweetfish. Thank you for that, man. But I just love hearing that, man. You talked about killing two birds with one stone. I literally had a potential customer that we've been talking through with everything going on right now. They've put their podcast on hold a little bit, but we had a conversation. Hey, let's sync up. Let's figure out next steps. By the way, we were riffing on this. Do you mind if we take the last 20 minutes of this call and record something for B2B Growth? And we did that. We had a great conversation and it was just very natural. It created content. It deepened that relationship. We still talked business. And so it's great to hear from someone else who's not, in just podcasting as neck deep as we are, say that. You guys produce a show that most often is producing 2 episodes a week. You are a busy guy. You have tons of stuff going on. Outreach is continuing on this trajectory. Sales Hacker is providing tons of value. You guys are doing webinars and all sorts of things. And yet you guys still have the bandwidth with some help, as you mentioned, to keep it going and to keep delivering value and consistency. And hey, if there's an or an there, that's okay. Or if we kind of feel our way through this episode, that's okay. But your listeners can count on that consistency. And by and large, you've got, just great episodes to go out there, and they might not always follow the same format. You might start off a little bit differently, but again, back to that authenticity, people are able to connect with you. Well, speaking of that, Scott, for people who want to connect with you, you mentioned you personally, LinkedIn, look you up, Scott Barker. Where can they go to find more Sales Hacker content, whether that's the podcast, as well as stuff from Outreach and the Sales Engagement podcast, man?
Absolutely. So connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Barker. Go to www.saleshacker.com for, we have about 2 to 3 pieces of content we release on the blog every week. We do 2 webinars each and every week, and we have 2 podcasts that we release. And we actually just released a video series as well, which is really fun. It's called Demolition. So check it out on the left-hand side of Sales Hacker. And then for the sales engagement, if you like the sound of my voice and want to hang out with me a little bit, it's just salesengagement.com/podcast. And we try and release 2 episodes every week.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for the great chat. It's always great connecting with you online, offline. And hey, I'm just glad we recorded it. That's my meta ending for today. Thanks, Scott.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.